This morning opens with a sky that feels alert, sharp and unfinished. The Sun is in Aquarius, joined by Mars and Pluto, creating a mental atmosphere that scans, tracks and notices more than usual. There is a sense of scanning, noticing and connecting dots almost automatically. Your mind may feel switched on early, even before you have fully settled into the day. At the same time, the Moon is in Sagittarius, adding a forward-looking pull, a quiet urge to search for meaning, direction, or a bigger context for everything you are doing. This combination often creates an inner contrast. The thinking part of you is active, curious, and even decisive, while the emotional and physical layers are slower to respond. Saturn, sitting at the final degree of Pisces, adds to this feeling. It carries the tone of a long chapter reaching its natural limit, not with drama, but with a kind of deep exhale that has not fully released yet. You may sense that something is ending internally, even if you cannot name what it is. Neptune's first steps into Aries add another subtle note, suggesting the beginning of a new internal cycle that is still too new to define. Because of this, today's sky does not push for action, it heightens awareness. You may notice that you are thinking about your life more than living it in the moment, watching yourself move through routines with a slight sense of distance. This is not detachment in a cold sense, but observation. The question the sky is asking is not what should change, but how you are currently perceiving what is already here. There can be a feeling that insight is arriving faster than energy can reorganize. Mentally, things may feel clear, or at least clearer than before, while emotionally there is still softness, fatigue, or ambiguity. This gap is important. It signals an inner shift that is in progress rather than complete. Today sets a tone of noticing that gap without rushing to close it. Awareness, rather than resolution, is the starting point. As this day unfolds, the first place this sky tends to register is in the body, often before it becomes a clear thought. You may notice small signals early on, a jaw that feels tight when you are not consciously stressed, shoulders that lift slightly as soon as you start checking messages or thinking about the day ahead, breathing that stays higher in the chest, especially when your mind jumps forward into plans or expectations. The Moon in Sagittarius often brings a sense of inner movement, even when you are physically still. This can feel like restlessness in the legs or feet, an urge to stand up, stretch, or change position more often than usual. It is not necessarily anxiety. It is the body responding to a forward-pulling energy, a desire for space and expansion. Yet, with Saturn at the final degree of Pisces, that movement can feel slowed or weighted, as if part of you wants to move on, while another part is still tired from what came before. You might notice a fatigue that doesn't come from lack of sleep, a heaviness behind the eyes, a soft pressure in the chest. This is the tiredness that comes from carrying uncertainty for a long time, not knowing how something will resolve, staying adaptable for longer than feels comfortable. The body often carries this quietly until awareness catches up. Jupiter in Cancer makes emotional sensitivity more pronounced today. You may notice your stomach tighten when you feel responsible for someone else's feelings, or a familiar warmth or tension in the chest when family or close relationships come to mind. These reactions are quick and often unconscious. The body reacts first, long before the mind forms a story about why. Uranus in Taurus adds another layer to body awareness. Habits that once soothed you may not work as well today. You might reach for the usual distractions or comforts and notice they do not fully settle your nervous system. This is not a failure of coping, it is information. Your system may be asking for a different kind of regulation, something simpler or more physical, like slower movement, warmth, or quiet. Chiron in Aries can make sensations around effort and independence more visible. You may feel tension in the arms, upper back, or neck, areas associated with carrying and doing. This often surfaces when you feel you should handle things on your own or push through discomfort. Noticing this tension without immediately correcting it is part of today's work. None of these signals are problems to solve. They are early indicators. The body is showing you where awareness has arrived, but integration is still in progress. Simply noticing these sensations without labeling them or trying to change them allows the body to feel seen, and that alone can begin to soften the gap between insight and lived experience. As this internal state moves into daily life, it tends to show up in very ordinary moments. You may find yourself standing in the kitchen, going through a familiar routine, and suddenly feeling that something about it no longer fits. Not in a dramatic way, but in a quiet, honest way. The motions are the same, but your engagement with them has shifted. There is a subtle sense of outgrowing certain rhythms. In work or structured environments, this can appear as impatience with conversations that feel repetitive or unnecessary. Meetings that once felt manageable may now feel draining, not because they are difficult, but because they lack meaning. With Mercury and Venus in Sagittarius, the mind naturally frames experience in broader terms. You may catch yourself thinking about freedom, purpose, or whether the way you are organizing your time still reflects what you value. These thoughts often arrive quickly, then leave behind a physical response, a tightened breath or pressure behind the eyes. Communication today can feel slightly exposed. You may notice a stronger urge to speak honestly, but also a hesitation about how much to say. Sagittarius energy wants truth, but Saturn in Pisces reminds you of emotional consequences. This can result in holding back or in speaking carefully, choosing words that leave room rather than closing a door. Even small exchanges can feel heavier than usual if they touch on long-standing patterns. Jupiter in Cancer brings this dynamic into close relationships. You may become more aware of how much emotional labor you carry, especially with people you care about. Perhaps you notice yourself adjusting your tone, timing, or reactions to keep the peace. The body often signals this first. Shoulders rise slightly, the stomach tightens. There is a subtle pull to manage everyone's comfort before tending to your own. Decision-making today may feel slower, and that is not a flaw. You might find yourself pausing before committing, even to small things. This hesitation is not confusion, it is discernment. Uranus in Taurus is quietly shifting what stability means to you, and that can make old decision-making habits feel unreliable. You are sensing that some choices require a different pace. Throughout the day, there may also be moments of distraction or the urge to escape routine. Scrolling, planning future changes, or mentally checking out can be signals that meaning has thinned in certain areas of your life. These moments are not failures of focus. They are invitations to notice where your energy no longer wants to circulate automatically. Today, daily life becomes a mirror. The way you move, speak, decide, and respond shows you where awareness has already arrived, even if action hasn't caught up yet. Paying attention to these small interactions gives you more information than forcing clarity ever could. At the center of today is a very specific pattern. Awareness without resolution. Seeing clearly without being ready to move. You can see what is happening, sometimes with surprising clarity, but the system is not ready to move yet. This can feel uncomfortable if you are used to equating insight with action. Today separates those two on purpose. You may notice this as a kind of restlessness that does not quite turn into impatience. There is movement inside you, but it does not have a clear direction. Thoughts arise about change, freedom, or adjustment, yet they do not settle into a plan. Emotionally, there can be honesty surfacing that is not ready to become a decision. You might know what feels off before you know what should replace it. This pattern often creates the urge to do something just to relieve the tension, to clean, to reorganize, to have a clarifying conversation, or to mentally jump ahead into a future where things feel lighter. But today's astrology does not reward forcing resolution. It rewards noticing where energy is no longer flowing naturally. The feeling of wanting out, wanting more space, or wanting a different rhythm is part of the pattern. With the moon in Sagittarius, the system is scanning for meaning. With the Sun, Mars, and Pluto in Aquarius, the mind is identifying structural misalignment. Together, they highlight areas of life that technically still work, but no longer feel alive. This can show up as boredom that is not laziness, or irritation that is not anger, or fatigue that is not exhaustion. These are subtle signals that something has reached the end of its usefulness. The body often recognizes this before the mind feels ready to accept it. Saturn, at the final degree of Pisces, reinforces this theme. Long emotional processes, compromises, or periods of uncertainty are quietly concluding. Not with closure speeches or dramatic endings, but with a sense of inner completion. You may realize you are less invested in explaining yourself, less interested in justifying your choices, more aware of what you cannot carry forward. Because this pattern does not come with immediate answers, it is easy to misinterpret it as being stuck. But it is not stagnation. It is data collection. The system is gathering information about what drains you, what still supports you, and what simply takes effort without giving anything back. Uranus in Taurus plays a key role here. It disrupts comfort patterns slowly. What used to regulate you may no longer work, which can create the feeling that something is wrong with you. In reality, your nervous system is updating. Old ways of coping, organizing, or motivating yourself may feel flat because they no longer match who you are becoming. This pattern is not asking you to fix your life today. It is asking you to observe where meaning has thinned and where energy leaks quietly occur. Awareness is the work. When clarity is allowed to sit without pressure, it naturally begins to reorganize the system underneath. Today is not about resolution. It is about recognition. That alone is enough to move things forward, even if it does not look like movement yet. This pattern exists because several planetary currents are meeting at once, each speaking to a different layer of experience. The Sun in Aquarius, closely aligned with Mars and Pluto, sharpens perception. It brings an ability to see systems clearly, including the systems you operate within every day. Work structures, relationship dynamics, internal rules you live by. Aquarius does not ask how something feels first. It asks whether it makes sense, whether it still functions, whether it reflects who you are now. At the same time, Saturn is finishing its long journey through Pisces, sitting at the very last degree of the sign. This is a threshold point. Pisces has been dissolving boundaries, softening certainty, and asking for surrender over a long period of time. Saturn here has required endurance. It has asked you to stay present with uncertainty, to hold emotional ambiguity without immediate answers. The fatigue you may feel today is not random. It is the natural tiredness that comes when a long emotional lesson is reaching completion. The moon in Sagittarius adds another layer. It pulls attention toward meaning and direction, toward the question of where all this effort is leading. Sagittarius does not like being contained by routines that lack purpose. When the moon moves through this sign, it highlights where life has become technically functional but internally empty. This creates the sense of wanting more space, more truth, more alignment, without yet knowing what form that should take. Uranus in Taurus quietly destabilizes the foundations underneath all of this. Taurus governs stability, comfort, and regulation. Uranus there changes how safety is experienced. The nervous system no longer responds to old comforts in the same way. What once grounded you may now feel insufficient. This can be unsettling, especially if you rely on consistency to feel secure. But it is not chaos. It is a recalibration of what stability actually means for you now. Chiron in Aries brings sensitivity around self-reliance into this mix. Aries is about initiative and independence. Chiron here exposes old wounds around having to carry things alone, around proving strength through endurance. When this is activated, awareness of these patterns can feel raw. You may notice how quickly you default to handling everything yourself, even when support is available. Neptune's first degree in Aries is subtle but important. It signals the beginning of a new motivational cycle, but without clear direction yet. This is why today feels unfinished. Something new is forming, but it has not fully entered consciousness. The system senses change before it can name it. Together, these transits explain why awareness is high, but action feels premature. The astrology is not pointing toward immediate movement. It is illuminating the internal landscape, so that when movement does come, it is aligned rather than reactive. Nothing here is asking you to act yet. It's asking you to notice what no longer fits before something new asks to move. When days like this appear, the old reflex is to assume something is wrong. Restlessness gets labeled as dissatisfaction. Fatigue gets interpreted as lack of motivation. The gap between clarity and action starts to feel like failure or delay. This is especially true for people who are used to growing by pushing forward, figuring things out quickly, and moving on. Today's astrology asks for a different reading. What you're experiencing isn't confusion, it's transition. And transition rarely feels clean while it's happening. Awareness often arrives first, long before the body and nervous system feel ready to reorganize around it. Insight comes online faster than energy can redistribute. That gap is not a mistake, it is part of the process. With Aquarius strongly emphasized, the mind sees patterns clearly. You may suddenly recognize why certain dynamics no longer work, or why certain roles feel draining. In the past, this recognition might have triggered immediate action, a decision, a confrontation, a reinvention. But Saturn at the final degree of Pisces changes that rhythm. It slows things down so integration can happen. This is where the reframe matters. Instead of asking why you are not moving yet, it may be more accurate to ask what is still settling. Instead of assuming you are procrastinating, notice whether your system is actually conserving energy to recalibrate. This is not stagnation. It is a pause that has purpose. The discomfort you feel is not a signal to fix your life. It is a signal that your internal reference points are shifting. Old motivations lose their grip before new ones fully arrive. This in-between phase can feel empty or uncomfortable because it does not offer immediate rewards. Yet it is often the most honest part of change. There is also a deeper layer here. Many people have learned to equate worth with movement, to feel valuable only when progressing, improving, or producing. Days like this challenge that belief. They remind you that awareness itself is a form of movement, even when nothing outward changes. Reframing the day in this way allows the tension to soften. You are not behind. You are not missing something. You are in the middle of a shift that requires observation before action. Letting that be true reduces the pressure to perform clarity before it has fully formed. Today is not asking you to become someone new. It is asking you to stop forcing yourself to operate from patterns that no longer match your internal state. That alone is a meaningful shift, even if it does not look dramatic from the outside. Moving through today becomes gentler when you stop trying to resolve the tension and instead work with it. Integration today isn't about doing more or fixing anything. It's about letting the body catch up to what the mind already knows, slowly. One of the simplest ways to do this is to slightly slow your physical pace, not dramatically, just enough to notice. Walk a little more deliberately. Pause for half a second longer before responding to messages. Let transitions take the time they actually need. This gives your nervous system space to catch up with the insights already circulating in your mind. Breath plays a quiet role today. You may notice that when thoughts speed up, your breathing becomes shallow without you realizing it. Rather than correcting it, just notice it. Often the breath deepens on its own once it has your attention. This is not a technique. It is a reminder that the body knows how to regulate when it is not being pushed. Pay attention to what genuinely settles you, not what you think should. Some habits that once worked may feel flat or ineffective now. That does not mean you are doing them wrong. It means your system has changed. Notice what brings even a small sense of steadiness. Warmth, silence, familiar music, a brief walk without a destination. These small choices help integrate awareness into the body. Curiosity is more supportive than discipline today. Instead of asking what you should be doing, notice what draws your interest naturally. Reading something that broadens your view. Listening to a conversation that feels honest rather than productive. Letting your attention rest where it feels lightly engaged rather than forced. It also helps to create a clear stopping point. Saturn's influence favors containment. Ending tasks consciously rather than letting the day blur together helps prevent quiet energy leaks. This might mean closing your laptop at a set time or deciding that something is good enough for today. Integration today is subtle. It happens through small acknowledgements rather than big actions. When you allow awareness to settle without pressure, the system reorganizes itself naturally. You do not need to guide it. You only need to give it space. As the day moves toward its close, the atmosphere naturally quiets. Saturn's presence becomes more noticeable, not as heaviness, but as a desire for simplicity. You may feel less interested in explaining yourself or making sense of everything out loud. Mental activity softens, and what remains is a quieter awareness of what feels complete for today. This is not withdrawal in a negative sense. It is integration. The system has taken in information all day, both consciously and unconsciously. Now it begins to settle. You might notice this as a spontaneous sigh, a loosening in the shoulders, or the feeling that you do not need to stay alert anymore. These are signs that the body is closing the loop. A gentle reflection to carry with you is this. Where are you already aware of the pattern, but still moving as if you are not? Not as a criticism, but as an observation. Awareness does not demand immediate change. It simply asks to be acknowledged. There is no promise attached to today, no prediction about what will happen next. What today offers is alignment between understanding and lived experience. Even a small amount of that alignment reduces inner pressure. It allows the day to end without unfinished business. As you step into rest, let the insights of the day remain unfinished if they need to. Clarity does not expire overnight. When awareness is allowed to settle naturally, it carries forward on its own. That is enough for this day.